Well, okay. So without further ado, I would like to introduce an award-winning personal development trainer, lifestyle consultant, motivational keynote speaker, and author with a background in English, psychology, counseling, hypnotherapy, medical therapy, and teaching children with special needs. And she is none other than Seetha Sagaran. And her session will be on pitfalls of favoritism, its impact on teacher and student. Some of the questions that will be addressed during this session are, why is favoritism a sensitive subject in educational institutions and society? Number two, how do prejudice and bias affect our learning and relationships? Number three, how can teachers and parents play a more active role in eliminating discrimination in the classroom and at home? Number four, how can school equip teachers to overcome the pitfalls of favoritism and discrimination? So without further ado, Seetha, the stage is all yours. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Can you all hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Sorry again. Before I start my session, first of all, thank you very much, Anusha, Education Influence, and of course, Gavin McCormick as well, for the opportunity and the privilege to be part of this wonderful group of amazing educators. And before I start my session, I'd just like to say a small note of appreciation to Barbara. Barbara, I really enjoyed your session. And I wish I had you as my maths teacher when I was small. So I'm sure all the all the children that who's lucky to be taught by you are really, really fortunate. It was lovely being part of your session. Thank you. So now, what is favoritism? Now, favoritism occurs in every discipline of life. However, specifically in educational institutions. Interestingly, students and teachers are considered as change agents. They have a deeply impactful relationship with each other. And unfortunately, favoritism can contribute to negligent and hurtful actions towards others. So what does favoritism create? It creates a barrier towards efficiency. It also enables a lot of undesirable attitudes associated to economic and socio-cultural background, language, lifestyle, gender, color of skin, status, and power. Now, when we say a teacher is showing favoritism, we are implying that the teacher gives something special or gives special treatment through action or otherwise to a student. And what is a result of that? Educators are affected by the learner's accomplishment or failure. And from my own life, I have a small story to share with you here. I'm a Gavel Club counselor. A Gavel Club counselor is someone who is teaching or imparting the program of Toastmasters. It's a nonprofit making organization that promotes leadership and communication skills. So what happened here in my story was that we had a wonderful member of our club, extremely capable, but very, very naughty. So we had a concept years ago when children would be able to vote for the leaders of the coming year. So now this specific young member was elected. And I have to admit, and I feel ashamed to admit, that I was a little concerned by it. I didn't have to be, because although he was naughty, he proved us all wrong by ensuring that he performed his role as a leader amazingly. He just needed an opportunity to get a responsible task so that he becomes engaged. So in other words, what I learned from that incident was we are all affected, both the teacher And of course, the students as well, we are all affected by how the learner responds in a classroom atmosphere or a learning atmosphere. Now, favoritism can also occur due to gender bias, and the educator can also show favoritism when the educator is a friend, is a relative, or a guardian. Now, I'd like to talk about implicit bias here. What is implicit bias? It's actually attitudes or behaviors that affect our actions in an unconscious manner. So how do we prevent that? Number one, we allow, as teachers or educators, we allow children to have the time to get to know one another. Something like the human library concept. I'm sure many of you are already familiar with the human library concept. It was started in Copenhagen in 2000 by two brothers and their friends. They belong to the local NGO and started this initiative when their friend was killed. So when we consider the human library concept, the human library basically challenges stereotypes through prejudices and enables things to be worked out through dialogue. So instead, people are books or they are loaned to the readers for a chat. So in a classroom atmosphere, I would definitely recommend that teachers are able to make some time for the students so that students get to know each other better. And this also helps them avoid a fixed mindset. Number two would be to ensure that the teacher evaluates the media. What exactly is the media communicating when it comes to showing bias or prejudice? So filtering is very critical. Talk about important events or important news that affects people's lives all over the world. The next one is to become more aware about our own bias. How are we able to know and understand our own bias? That we will come to it a little later. The next step would be to provide equitable practices. So how do we create equitable practices in a classroom? Create specialized, differentiating curricular experiences by creating multiple options as well of knowledge acquisitions, sense making, regardless of race, ethnicity, sexuality, gender, and of course, even for children who have special needs. I think for that aspect, one of the best ways to even understand the bias that we may have is to take the Harvard University's Project Implicit Test. It is a 5 to 6 minutes test that provides us with the knowledge about bias and disparities. The test was created with the collaboration of researchers who were interested in implicit social cognition. And through this test, we are able to get an idea of the level of bias we may have regarding race, disabilities, gender, religion, and skin tone. So how exactly does favoritism cripple a student? The first step would be it creates a mistrust. And when I talk about mistrust, I would like to talk about my own experiences as a child. When I was in school, I was not a student who was interested in studies. I was not at all interested in what each teacher was trying to communicate through the sessions that were happening every day. So what happened was, since I wasn't causing any problems, I was amongst those who was the forgotten lot. Those children or those students who are, okay, they are present, but more or less, they get ignored because they are not particularly showing anything exemplary in terms of their subjects or in terms of their talents or potential. So I was someone who had actually witnessed the challenges that students face when there is favoritism. So when I discuss this past with you, definitely it's not out of any purpose of blaming or any criticism here, but I would just like to mention to you what children are likely to go through when they experience favoritism in the classroom. So like I said, it creates a sense of mistrust because you're not very sure whether you are getting an opportunity that another child who has been picked out for a specific role has. Number two, the child starts also to question ethics and integrity. To what extent is the child getting the equal opportunity? Or is it because of the manner the child is responding in classroom? Is that what is determining the opportunity that the child is getting? The next one is, yes, those who are victims or who are suffering from favoritism in classroom can experience rejection, a sense of isolation as well. Number four, a sense of anger, a certain anger that can come in when the child notices that time and time again, favoritism is happening in the classroom. And number five, which is very unfortunate, is withdrawal. The child could naturally start to withdraw from attempting to participate in opportunities in the classroom. When I talk about withdrawal here and all these challenges that a student can face, I'd like to assure all you teachers that fortunately, I really didn't feel much of this. It was more like, okay, it really doesn't matter. But unfortunately, I think for a lot of students, that's not how it actually happens. Children can withdraw, get into their own shell too. When I talk about getting into their own shell, I think of a child who had been part of our Gavel Club many years ago. Now, during that time, we followed a system where the children were allowed to vote. We no longer have that system today prevalent because we noticed that sometimes children in their innocence can show favoritism. So in this case, what happened was we had a member who was time and time again proving to be extremely focused and dedicated regarding her role that was given to her. She was one of the leaders in the classroom. However, when it came to getting a formal recognition of a leader, she had to be voted by the children. And for 2 continuous years, she was not voted for the role of that leader, for the position of that leader. And sadly and unfortunately, she decided to leave. And despite me speaking to her and assuring her that she would be recognized as a leader in the coming year, because I realized the folly that I had made in believing that let the children have the freedom to elect their leader, I realized that it could also, because of favoritism, lead to a child feeling demotivated and withdrawing from what the child can do. So it was definitely a learning opportunity for me, and I'm sure for the rest of my team as well. So how can favoritism sometimes create opposite reactions? When I say create opposite reactions, it's about recognizing the emotion and the traits of the concept. Because what happens is you have children who could feel isolated. We have children who could also feel that they are favored. And sometimes they could feel that they have undeserved praise, and there is overlooking of mistakes by those children who are favorites with the teachers. At the same time, it could also mean ignoring students who are performing in a very exemplary manner, but the attention is being given to another set. And when I mention about this concept here, it once again takes me back many years ago when my children was part of the Gavel Club. So what happened was, since I was the club counselor helping run this club, I was extremely careful to make sure that the rest of the children do not feel that I am showing favoritism to the children. But unfortunately, what happened was, because of the fact that I was so conscious of not showing favoritism to my children, it backfired. When I say it backfired was, I would appreciate the other members a lot more generously than my own children, which once again was not the best of things to do. So what could have I done better? I could probably have ensured that I treated my children the same way that I treated the rest of the group. So instead of showing them more attention, or let's say recognizing them more, I needed to have made sure that I treated all the children equally. Well, once again, it was a learning experience. I felt sharing with you these instances would also give you all a better idea of how important this subject is in a classroom or a learning atmosphere. Yes, I agree with you, Mona. At times, it is very, very natural. But how effectively and how objectively are we able to look at ourselves so that we don't keep making the same mistake again? I think that's what I'm trying to tell here. Thank you, Mona. So how are parents able to teach children not to follow favoritism? Because a lot of us are able to learn the importance of being non-biased from our home environment. So the first thing is, I think when you are a parent or you're a caregiver, you're able to use children's literature, including movies. Now, for example, the movie Turning Red, which was a recent release by Disney and Pixar, was an immense hit with both adults and children. How many of you have seen the movie Turning Red? Could any of you just show a show of hands here? For those of you who have seen, you would realize that it was a movie which talked about the adolescent age. It also talked about what a child felt when there was so much of pressure from the parent regarding whom the child sees, where the child goes, what the child does. So there was a lot of pressure on this child because of I would call it the interference of the parent, despite the fact the parent was very loving. So using children's literature or movies to discuss certain events or aspects with your child can help children become a lot more objective. Number two is using news media. Now, when we look at news, we are also able to see just to what extent is news getting exaggerated. So discuss that at home with the children, because that will also enable children to have a better idea of how to be not so prejudiced. Number three is speak objectively and without bias at home. It doesn't matter about whether it's about people or religion or color or status. It doesn't matter. As much as possible, be objective when it comes to talking about people. Because children, they observe and they learn a lot more from what we do than what we say. In fact, when I look at my own life and when I look at my childhood days, I think the first teachers who taught me the importance of being as objective and unbiased as possible, they had been my parents. Because no matter whether it was someone who was coming from a well-off surrounding or whether it was someone who had absolutely no financial resources, They were always treated the same way at home. They were always given the same hospitality at home. And I think that has really helped me tremendously. So as much as possible, the more we show what we are, and we would like our children to incorporate the lack of not being biased, the best way to teach them is through the home environment. Number 4 is avoiding gender stereotypes. When you have children, boy and girl, how do you treat them and how do you give them responsibilities is also a way of communicating to them. To what extent do we need to show bias towards the other gender? So I think that is also one way of enabling us to, as parents, to teach children at home more effectively about the subject. And last but not least, as parents, it's very important that we start early so that the children are able to observe and learn from us so that we become better at what we tell them to do much later. Now, when it comes to following I think an educational institution, or how exactly can an institution enable teachers to become more conscious about the subject, is the school can prepare questionnaires for students and teachers so that they are able to find out the opinions of favoritism amongst their staff as well as teachers. Number 2 is to identify factors of teachers' favoritism. Find out exactly in what way are teachers prone to favoritism. So absolutely, Anita, I think parents too, without realizing, they do become biased. Yes, that happens. But I think the key here is to keep in mind just how effective and important and the impact we can have on others if we are if we really reduce or have no bias at all. So the third one is to also include in the questionnaire differences, that is, between the opinions that students may have about favoritism as well as teachers. What is the differences? What are the differences we are able to find out? Number 4 is to conduct in-service trainings and seminars for students and teachers. Invite professionals to come and speak to both students and teachers so that the school is able to provide an environment for students and teachers to address any concerns. So the management can also reach out and speak to students periodically regarding issues of favoritism, of course, with the assurance that it would be completely confidential. And when it comes to working out strategies, it's very important to take the support of students. So in other words, when you have student leaders in a school, have them also be part of this initiative to ensure favoritism is as little as possible, or is having as little an impact as possible in the classroom or in the school. Work with the parents as well. Parents can also contribute when it comes to enabling the school to have a code of conduct. So if your school does not have a code of conduct right now, this is the right time to work on it. So how does it help? I think it enables the classroom management to become easier for the teachers and makes it more effective for the teachers as well, so that the classroom becomes a safe and positive learning environment for students. Number 2, it also enables both teachers as well as students to acknowledge emotions. We all have emotions. There are always times when our emotions could cloud our judgment, can it not? So by acknowledging the emotions we have, we are also able to understand and become better aware about where we need to work on as far as our prejudice is concerned. Number three is to be in control. We are more in control when we have a code of conduct, which is prepared by the school. You have a better idea of how to go about things, better idea on how you need to relate to students, relate to the problems they may have. Number 4 is also to build a good rapport. You have a better rapport between teachers and students when you have a code of conduct. Set a tone, and most of all, it means that you're assuring fairness for all. When we talk about acknowledging the emotions here, we need to be aware that it is our responsibility to be aware of our emotions, whether positive or negative. And when we talk about being in control, it's about the process of self-improvement, setting standard of exemplary controlled behavior in the classroom and the school environment. We can build a good rapport when students feel encouraged to be positive and are made to be equally important. It doesn't matter how they are performing in school. And at the same time, when we set the tone for all through these actions, we are able to bring in the much required fairness. So by being fair-minded, we are able to assess students and children more effectively. Have a clear assessment framework to ensure that every student is treated fairly. These steps will support in helping students thrive and grow and enjoy the education process. So as far as students are concerned, I think it's time I wound up before we get into the Q&A. As far as teachers are concerned here, so that they are able to enable children to cope better in school, you have some of these everyday activities, such as having icebreaker activities, where children are encouraged to just go ahead, interact with each other in their own creative ways. Have mindful meditation introduced daily. At the same time, have a certain curriculum that promotes tolerance. Celebrate holidays that promote inclusivity, including even days where children who have special needs, you have days such as autism, days which also celebrate autism and give special recognition and respect to those who are experiencing autism and other challenges. Adapt school activities for children with disabilities. Will also be making sure they are very much part of the school environment. So by working with school, the school management team, teachers, parents, and students, we can take and help the children understand the differences of making sure that we be fair. We teach social justice through age-appropriate literature, lessons, and familiarize them with examples from day to day. I would love to know if you have any questions. Thank you very much, Anusha and Education Influence once again.
For the lovely, very amazing presentation. And if you have any questions for Seetha, please do unmute yourself. And please, yes, we have Anita. Hi, Anita, how are you?
I am good. I'm good. Thank you. Thank you so much. I was just thinking, could you share some literature with us? As you mentioned, you did mention about a movie and some specific literature which we can read and, or use it, or some story specifically, because I'm not aware of it, that what kind of literature I can share it with children.
Certainly, certainly. In fact, what I can do is I will probably send a couple of links to Anusha, and I think probably then she would be able to email it to all of you. Is that fine, Anusha?
Yes, so what we're going to do is that we will upload this recorded version of our session and also the related resources with the links under the presentation title on our website. That would be helpful, I think.
I think that would be great. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. You have talked about a very sensitive issue, which generally we try to, just ignore it and take it as if everyone has to accept it. So
Thank you so much,
thank you
Anita.
so
Thank you
much.
very
Thank
much.
you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you, Anita. Does anybody else have questions? Please do unmute yourself. We have Ojar from Pakistan. Hi, Ojar. Are you there?
Hi there, how you going?
Hi there.
How are you?
We're good. Do you have any questions for Seetha?
Actually, not at the moment. I have millions of questions, but not right now. Actually, yeah. I actually, especially with the special needs, I will have
I'm so sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Not
Can you
audible.
please repeat it?
special needs.
The sound is very blurry, Ojar. Please, if you do have any questions, please put it in the chat box. And also we'll have the recorded version of our Seetha session and Barbara session on our website, educationinfluence.com/spotlight. If you have any questions, please do unmute yourself and please, the floor is yours.
I would also like to add, I think that we as educators need to educate the parents too, because my experience says that the biases at home are huge. Two kinds. One, because of gender, and the second is also because of maybe how you're performing. It also depends on your academic performance. If one child is doing very well academically, I have seen there is a softer approach of the parent towards that child than the other one who's probably not doing very well academically. So I think it's very, very important for us as educators to have a special kind of a session or some kind of the message has to be conveyed to them equally. It's very, very important.
And you're absolutely right, Anita, because thank you for sharing that with us, because I've always noticed that a lot of pressure that as adults we feel, many of it is thanks to the early years. Because the early years, they really create such an impact. Like, for example, in Barbara's session, we were able to not just understand the concept of numbers, but it's about learning to become more familiar and being in harmony with the environment. In fact, what I noticed probably most of all, maybe because of the field that I'm coming from, Barbara, in your session, I noticed was it's not just about learning about numbers. It's about how can the children understand what it means to live in a place where you're able to understand each other better. In what way is all of us contributing in others' lives?
Exactly, Seetha. May I answer directly on that?
Yes, please do.
Thank you. While you were presenting, I was, my mind was running in terms of working in terms of how we could possibly also use Numberland, our little numbers, to bring across just this, like not being biased, that every person is valuable as he or she is, just the way they are, and that the shy child is as much the same worth or whatever as other ones. So I guess this is with the numbers as being possibly placeholders, just as puppets are anyway. But we could possibly also integrate this there, because if you already have the children being engaged here, like playing with the numbers, we could always come up with a little story where one of the numbers is sad. Why is the number sad? Children always want to help. And from my experience as a parent, I have to say that I bumped into parents who were not at all approachable of being not biased towards their children. There was this one boy who would really bully my son all the time, and so I talked to the mother, perhaps, and she was absolutely like unapproachable. Then I talked to the boy, you know, how would you feel like if you were new into this class, and blah blah blah. So that worked a little bit, but it was, you know, it was a little bit disappointing. You cannot always count on the parents. I think that's what I want to say. Obviously, you throw the balls everywhere, and you get something out of it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and then you need a different approach. But because this, and I'm glad it came across as I mean it, Seetha, this number line is not a mass training program. It's about the entire thing of living together, being together, being friends, and have co-adventures together and stuff. So, and this also goes out to all the other wonderful people here. And this is what I'm hoping to get from Education Influence as a network, that we really bring together our focus and evaluate how we could possibly use one thing or connect it, because connections, children love connections, don't they?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We do. Maybe explore, get something out of that. It doesn't have to be much. Often it's just the little thing that sparks something, doesn't it? So it was very enlightening.
Thank you so much, Barbara. I enjoyed your session as well. Absolutely.
Yeah. Should keep in touch.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in for our spotlight. Thank you, Seetha. Thank you, Barbara.